Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. So our theme for this week's class is travel. And as I'm making this video, I am about to travel to Massachusetts. And when you guys watch it, I will be back. So I'm going to show you a couple different techniques. You can really, it's going to be really wide open. You can use any medium you want, any technique you want, but stick with the theme of travel. So if you've been traveling recently, maybe you can incorporate something personal. So the first thing I'm going to show you is a technique some of you have done before, where we are collaging over a page, and I'm just going to be using a sketchbook, and this happens to be a Bristol vellum, which a lot of you guys are using that kind of paper. That would be a perfect paper. So this is a map of Idaho and Wyoming, and after our Yellowstone trip I did this, and these were little marks of where we were going to be headed. And so I used a Pitt pen. It's a Faber-Castell Pitt artist pen, and it's waterproof. And this happens to be an SB, which is soft brush, so it'll make a nice thin and thick line, and I drew over the collage area. Here's another example. This doesn't have anything to do with travel, but the music sheets torn up and pasted on, and then I actually put a little watercolor wash over it, and some, on both of these I've used a mixed media, a gesso, which is like white house paint, and I've gessoed over the surface of the collage music sheets, so it's pushed it back a little bit, and the drawing then will stand out. So those were some examples. What I've done now is I've taken a map of Massachusetts, and I put it in our printer and made a photocopy of it. So I didn't tear up the actual map. This is all just photocopies. And then I tore out a place where it said Bradley International Airport, which is where we fly in when we go visit our son. You know, he's right around in this area. So what I'm going to use for the subject, I took a photo of a couple of my suitcases, and I've drawn them on some tracing paper. Now, it's almost the same size, so I probably could have just traced it, but I don't like doing that. I like to do my own, you know, kind of tweak it a little bit. So it's going to fit on here, and I can use graphite transfer paper, put down with the graphite side down, tape this on, and then slide this in and transfer it. But the first thing I want to do, and I suggest this, is to knock back this a little bit so it's not quite as obvious. And just by the way, I have used several different adhesives for putting this on. One really good one is ArtQuest PPA, or Perfect Paper Adhesive, and it's matte, so if it gets on the surface it won't be shiny. This is another good one, Pam Carricker's mixed media adhesive, and just good old Elmer's glue. And I think I noticed a little piece is coming off here, so hopefully, you know, this never works. It's always see if I can put a little bit more on there and make sure nothing's sticking up. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is take some of this gesso, and really it's just kind of like an acrylic house paint, but these both happen to be watercolor ground, but this is Daniel Smith and this is Cheap Joe's, so American Journey. So either one of these are good, or you could, I'm sure you could go to Michael's or one of those places and get some gesso, Gesso. And that's what artists use on canvases and so on to create a surface for their paint. So I'm going to just, and it just looks like white. And I'm going to wet my brush first. And just use a cheapo brush. I'm not, you know, like one that isn't your great watercolor brush. This is just an acrylic brush, but I'm going to use this large one, and I'm going to sort of water it down by the water that's in my brush, and I'm going to apply it. And it looks, maybe add a little bit more water here. It looks pretty white, but it dries a little clearer. And just to give it a little bit of, little less importance, you know, so it's subordinating, really. That good old word we use for composition. We want the drawing of the suitcases to be dominant and the map to be subordinated. Just a hint of the map, so it's not like the first thing you see. So I've watered it down a little bit. Okay, and then that has to dry, and I'll put my brush in the water so I won't be wrecked. And you know, on the music sheet one I showed you, you can also tear strips and put little bits. It would be fun to use if you're going to incorporate collage, you know, tickets that you, or, you know, like a plane ticket or a tag that was applied to your suitcase, or, you know, if you visited a museum while you were traveling, you know, and you got the little stub or whatever. So, and this happens to be a similar, I like these, they are by Strathmore visual journals, and this happens, they come in different kinds. This happens to be a watercolor, and they're a nice size to carry around and to sketch on location or to do things that are gonna, you know, be permanently in there. So I'm gonna put this aside for it to dry, and I'm gonna show you a different technique while that's drying. And if this is not foreign to you, this new technique, I'll save these for later. And I'm still using the theme of suitcases. Put these aside. But this time it's going to be on with the theme of Wayne Thiebaud. So remember when we did the colored pencil outlines and multiple outlines in many colors, and then we used some watercolor. So I've already kind of sketched out this the two suitcases, and lo and behold, I did have to use some 2-point perspective on this. So I knew that these two lines were heading toward each other and they were angling up. So even though I know this is a right angle, it no longer looks like a right angle. This is angling up, little wheels. It's probably hard to see because I drew it lightly. So, and then the other one is perspective, also 2-point. And then I ran into some perspective in the floor, and got a little bit of 2-point perspective going on here. So the vanishing points are up high. This is a high eye level, so the vanishing points are way off the page. I'm not going to even bother to use them. I'm just going to eyeball it, and I know that the tiles will appear to get smaller the farther I go back, and the lines here are appearing to go to a vanishing point somewhere off in the distance. Okay, so I've got this kind of drawn in, and again, it's always nice to have a little foreground to raise your object up a little higher. And even though there's not a need to put a doorway or anything, just to break up the background, and I don't want a tangent point where it's hitting right here, let's just move it over a little bit and give it a vertical so I have some breakup of the negative space. Okay, so I'm going to take some colored pencils, and I'm going to do, and I like to do sort of quick outlines instead of perfect little outlines that are just right on, exactly on the line. I want the line to just kind of brush aside a little bit. Let me hold that down so it doesn't curl. And this was just a photo I set up and took and then printed it out, loaded it from my phone onto my computer on the photo program on the computer, and then I printed it out from there. So now I think you can see my lines a little bit better. And the nice thing is it doesn't have to be exact. If you make a mistake, it's okay. Just go back over it with another color and correct it, and that gives it a kind of a looser look. So there's these little zippers here. The wheels. Keep it kind of loose if you're doing the Wayne Thiebaud style. And again, you could really use anything. You could do pencil, graphite techniques, whatever your favorite is. You guys have had a little taste of a lot of different techniques by now, so you might know what your favorite is. These bags are going to be packed full. I'm always a packer that says, well, pack more than I need just in case. And my husband is the minimalist, and he just he packs just what he knows he's going to need. And I'm thinking, well, I don't know what the weather's going to be. I don't know if we're going to go out somewhere special. You know, lots of different kinds. And then, of course, all kinds of little gifts to take to the kids. And so I'm a heavy packer. This is supposed to be a small one and a large one, and they'll both be filled. Luckily, Southwest lets you do 2 free suitcases. But we're getting excited. So I'm still looking at this, even though I did the preliminary drawing, I still go back to the original reference. Not that I'm copying exactly, but I need to make sure that there isn't something that I missed. And we do have some lovely cast shadows here, so let's go ahead and include those. As you remember, on the Wayne Thiebaud we have, and there's multiple cast shadows here, so because of the light in the room, but I'm just going to stick with one here. There's the floor line, baseboards and so on. Okay, so I've kind of got it worked out with one color. Now I'm going to start to go in with other colors, and I'm no longer looking at the reference so much. Once in a while I'll glance at it, but mostly I'm just following kind of what the blue is. But you see, because I'm going fast, I'm not always hitting it. I'm purposely sort of missing, so that all the colors don't glob together in one color. So I can kind of see the hint of some of the colors peeking out and some of them not. And you don't even have to do every color on every place. And my intention then is I'm going to do some watercolor here too. Push kind of hard. You want those to show. Okay, and let's go with 3 primary colors. Ooh. Maybe I can emphasize those more on the lighter side and not so much on the dark. And I'm pushing really hard on this. little lime green here. And then remember, you can always go back in after it's dry and it's painted and add some more colors. So nice, I like it. So there's all my wild colors. I'm going to take a quick picture of this so I can put it on the Google Classroom, and so you guys can see this, what it looked like at this stage a little bit more. Okay, I'm ready to do a little painting on it now. Remember, the watercolor will resist a little bit, or the colored pencil has a little wax, so it will resist the watercolor. Now, I have black, which actually will be kind of fun to create that black against those wild colors. So I'm going to get a couple of large brushes, largish. And I'll mix some black. I'm going to use ultramarine blue, and some orangey color. Here's Scarlet Lake, and a little burnt sienna. So if I mix those two together, I can either mix them on the paper or a little bit of both on the palette. Okay, so I noticed that it's a little lighter on the top where the light's hitting it, maybe a little bit more on the right side, because it looks like my shadow's going this way. So I'm going to start with the darkest part. And maybe I'll go a little lighter here on top. And I don't have to stick exactly with the real color. Now I can go maybe a little bit more bluish looking, light blue on the top here. And then nice thing about watercolor, when it dries, you can go back over it with dark. So I'm being kind of loose. It's a little bit darker over here. A little darker down at the bottom. Maybe I'll go in with a little purple. Leaving a little white of the paper is kind of fun. A little white showing through. So I'm getting the sense of the bulk of this. And then I can go in and touch up more values later. So I'm going to go in, like making that little area under the handle a little bit. So there's my suitcase. That's black. Just a little bit more value on this. And this is actually hot press watercolor paper, so it's somewhat smooth. Now the fun part will be the red. I'm going to go in with a more purpley red, like Permanent Rose, and then I'll have some warmer red, that Scarlet Lake, ready to go too. Because it is kind of a little bit yellowish. Woohoo! Going just a little more yellowish, orangey color on the top of it. And a little extra water. And then cooler. Maybe even a little alizarin crimson, which is pretty dark. Maybe a little blue going with it. I'm always looking at values. I'm always looking at what's dark and what's light. I got to be careful because this might still be a little bit wet and I don't necessarily want them to run together, so I'm going to sort of stay away from that edge. So by working kind of fast, this is very different than a technical, detailed painting of a portrait or something. I'm just kind of being playful like Wayne Thiebaud and letting the colors just sort of splash on there really fast. Okay, and so on. And then I could put some kind of dull color in the background. I like to do what I call palette mud. So I sort of mix lots of different colors together to get sort of a neutrally gray, the colors I've been using. Add a little more water so it's a little lighter. Should have my test paper nearby. Test it out. Yeah, that's a nice little, maybe go a little warmer. And then maybe, I kind of like that green. Why don't I throw some green in there? Not real bright, just kind of dull. And I had a little bit of green in the outlines, so that's a good thing. You know, I might want to go back and add more green in the outlines. I just have that warm green, but I don't know what happened. There it is. So as soon as I add a color somewhere, I need to make sure I have it back in the original. I want to make this green a little more turquoisey. So by putting the background in, it kind of emphasizes the objects a little bit more. And then let's say this floor is kind of a terracotta-ish. So maybe I'll just make some palette mud that looks sort of terracotta-ish. That looks good. And you always put your base color first, and then you could put your shadow over that, unless you want your shadow to be real separate looking, which is another option. By using a big brush, I can swoop that on there kind of fast. And let's go ahead and do right up top. And then I'll add shadow on top of that with some darker colors later. Okay, and then remember again, like I said, once this dries, I can go back in and outline it even more. But that's a whole different technique for my travel idea. These little silver things, I can go back in and use white, and I didn't do the tags white, so I can use white colored pencil or white pen, or I can scrub and lift. And the way I do that is I take a tissue and some fairly clean water, and I can kind of scrub that, and if it was dry, I just dab it. Here's a little. So it'll be easier to add the white colored pencil over that, because it doesn't really go very well over watercolor. It doesn't get pure white. There's also silver Prismacolors. I could use that, but then that tends to look a little gray and not really silvery as much as we would hope. So I'm just kind of putting some damp brush on it and just kind of lifting it a little bit. Okay. So I can come back in and rework that a little bit more and put the cast shadow in and so on. So now let's see if our map is dry. It's a little bit wet, so I'm going to take a minute and blow dry it. I'll be back. Okay, I'm back. I dried the map and I taped my tracing paper drawing on there and put the graphite transfer paper with the dark side down. I always peek on my first few lines just to make sure it's working. And you can see it transferred on there. So, because I'm going to go directly with the pen now, so I'm going to use a Faber-Castell Pitt pen and see how this works. I have other sizes, and I have other types of pens that are great. Here's a Micron pen, and another one that I really like is these multi-liner Copic. So I'm going to use the Copic multi-liner brush tip, and I've got to look at my reference again, and I'm going to kind of go thin and thick to make my line more interesting. The nice thing about this Saral graphite transfer paper, it's spelled S-A-R-A-L, like saran wrap, is that it is erasable. It doesn't have wax on it, so it won't resist if you use it watercolor on it later, or some kind of water-based media. Here's my little travel tag here. And I think you'll enjoy this technique too if you decide to use this. And the nice thing is, like the buffalo or the bison, I can just leave it as a black and white, not put any color in it. But in this case, I think I'd like to put some color in it. Some of you were in the class where we did ribbon snakes and worms, and I was thinking of that as I had these handles twisting around here on my duffel bag. So here it goes, and then you crisscross, and that was kind of nice to know how to do that. And there's a line down the middle. You can see my handle is twisting around. Don't be afraid of overlapping. Don't be afraid of challenging yourself. It's a matter of really studying what that line does. Just go back to the old contour drawing where you're looking at the object and not at your paper as much. You really follow what that edge is doing. Because this is a duffel bag, it's got a lot of bulginess and, you know, not really straight lines, but even so, it still has a little bit of that perspective. Angling up. The nice thing about this is, again, you can be a little loose in your watercolor if you decide to put watercolor, because these black lines are not going to go anywhere. This is a waterproof pen, so if you don't even have to stay out of the lines, and it might be more fun if you don't stay in the lines, just to make it a little more entertaining. So I kind of have everything I think that I need. If I miss something, I can always go back in. And it dries pretty much instantly. So I will put these aside. And these smaller numbers, like M is for medium, S is for small, then there's extra small. You could put fine details in if you wanted with thinner lines. And I have my mess from the last painting, so I'll kind of get rid of that. Okay. So let's start with that red, and it doesn't act the same on this watercolor ground, that gesso stuff. It won't act exactly the same as watercolor, but that's okay because you have that nice strong line. Oh, also, if the pencil lines, the tracing lines are bothering you, you can do a little erasing after you've drawn that. I still see a little bit of the graphite transfer paper lines on there, so I might want to lift those a little bit gently just so they aren't distracting. And you can see how the watercolor ground is sort of puddly. It's if any of you have ever used Yupo paper, it's kind of like that. It's a little bit resistant to the watercolors, but it'll work. And since I know this is all red, I can just go right over it like this. And where it's a little darker, Maybe I want to add some ultramarine blue or some cobalt blue in there and purplize it a little bit. Make it look a little bit darker here and there. So now I'm ready to go with the purple. Dark side over here. A little more blue. This is a squeeze out of the tube purple over there. And then I can add more water to make it go a little lighter as I go toward the top, or maybe a little more red, a little more of the warm color on the top. And then take a fine brush, a smaller brush, and go in with just red for that line that's down the middle of those straps. If I want to throw a little bit of cast shadow on there, I can. Let's go more blue. Bigger. If I want the shadow to look like it's fading away, I can take a damp brush and just kind of soften it away like that. Those of you that have had watercolor experience kind of know about some of these techniques, but if you've never done watercolor, you shouldn't worry about it. Your drawing is going to be nice and strong there. So here is my travel to Massachusetts, ready to rock and roll. Little darker darks in there. Another thing I could have done is just almost kept it like a pen drawing and done some cross hatching for the dark areas. And I see I still want to go darker on this, so I'm going to go in. So I have a definite dark and light side to give it a little bit of volume. There's the cast shadow in there of the strap, and where the edge of it kind of tilts up a little bit, I'm noticing there's some shadows there. Okay, I'll take a photo of it and put it on the Google Classroom so you can kind of see how this turned out. Fun. All right, have fun with this, and I hope you've enjoyed traveling in the past and can bring back some memories. Okay,